Hey there! If you're looking for a slightly different way to crochet a blanket, I have just the project for you. With a Tunisian crochet hook and the full stitch, you can create a thick but stretchy fabric that's perfect for a blanket. Whether you need a baby-sized blanket, a throw, or a king-sized blanket, I have you covered with this one. The step-by-step tutorial is coming up. You will need a corded Tunisian crochet hook for this project. The total length of the hook and cord combined should be about the same width or longer than the width of the blanket that you're making. So this pattern is available in 7 sizes, from a baby blanket all the way up to a king-sized blanket. So go ahead and refer to the pattern to get the specific number of chains you'll need for the size you want to create. Now, to make things easier for you to see, I'm going to work with a small swatch here at the beginning in a lighter shade than what my actual color A is, just for the full stitch demonstration, and then I'll jump to my actual blanket for the border. Now, after you have the foundation chain complete, insert your hook in the second chain. I like to work in the back bump of the chain here. This is just personal preference. And you'll yarn over and pull up a loop. Then insert your hook in the next chain, yarn over and pull up another loop, and keep doing this for every chain, gathering loops on your hook and cord for the forward pass of the foundation row. Now for the return pass of the foundation row, you'll yarn over and pull through 1 loop, then yarn over and pull through 2 loops. And repeat, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, until only 1 loop remains. This is the repeat for the return pass. We're always going to be doing this when working in this direction. Now, one little tip here is to be careful not to let this last loop get too loose as you're working back close to it, because if it's too loose, it'll leave a noticeable gap on the side of the blanket, and even though we're adding a border there, it'll still be noticeable. So you want to do what you can to keep that tension as steady as possible so this loop doesn't get too big. All right, now for row 1 of the full stitch. Insert your hook in the first space, yarn over and pull up a loop. Then insert your hook in the next space, yarn over and pull up a loop, and keep going until you get to the end of the row. Now, since we pulled up a loop in the first space at the beginning, we also need to pull up a loop in the last space too. This is the hardest thing to keep track of with the full stitch. But just remember, whatever you do at the beginning of the row, you also need to do at the end of the row. Then you'll insert your hook into 2 loops of this chain, yarn over and pull up a loop to finish off the forward pass of row 1. So we're going to repeat the return pass the same way we did before. Yarn over, pull through 1 loop first, then yarn over and pull through 2 until you have only 1 loop on your hook. All right, moving on to row 2. Since we worked in the first space on the previous row, we need to skip it here. Insert your hook in the next space, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then repeat to the end of the row. Now again, since we skipped the first space at the beginning of this row, we'll skip the last space too. Remember, within the row, what you do at the beginning is what you should also do at the end. But when you start the next row, what you did in the previous row, you're going to do the opposite. Then, of course, insert your hook in the last chain, catching 2 loops, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then work your usual return pass. Row 1 and row 2 make up the stitch pattern throughout this entire blanket. You're always going to be repeating rows 1 and row 2. But there is a stripe pattern, as you've probably already noticed, and here is how that's going to go. Here's the order that you should arrange your yarn. You'll work 3 rows of A, followed by 3 rows of B, then 3 rows of A, 3 rows of C, 3 rows of A, 3 rows of D, 3 rows of A, and 3 rows of E. Don't worry if you didn't catch all of this, it's in the written instructions. Just go ahead and refer to that to guide you as you move along. So that group collectively makes up one color repeat. And as you probably already guessed, the size of the blanket you're making will determine how many times you repeat the color repeat. So go ahead and refer again to the pattern for that specific number of repeats that you need to make for the full length of your blanket. For now, let's look at how to add another color and then switch back to your main color. You'll have what looks to be 2 completed rows and then a return pass. See how it kind of looks like a frame and it's sort of empty? As you're working the last return pass in your current color, you'll yarn over and pull through 2 until you have 2 loops remaining from that return pass. Then stop there. Then grab your contrast color, make a slip knot with the new color, place it on your hook, and pull it through the 2 remaining loops. That's going to finish off this return pass, but it's also going to secure your new yarn to the project. Now drop color A, but don't cut it. You can eliminate a lot of ends to weave in by just carrying it as you go. So you'll work the stitch pattern, the full stitch pattern, in the new color just as before. So you have 2 completed rows and a return pass with 2 loops left on your hook. You'll pick up color A at that point and use that yarn to yarn over and pull through the remaining 2 loops. Then it's safe to cut the other color, your contrast color, and continue the pattern with color A. Now once again, following the written instructions to get your full stitch pattern repeat, your color stripe pattern, and all of that information, that's going to walk you through the length of your project. When you have the full length of the blanket completed, the next step is to bind off. Again, you'll have 2 completed rows of color A and a finished return pass. Now you'll follow the stitch pattern here to let you know if you should work in this first space or in the second space. Yarn over and pull up a loop, then pull that loop through the loop that was on your hook. This is going to bind off the stitches as you go. So you'll insert your hook in the next space, yarn over, pull up a loop, then pull that loop through the first loop. And you'll just repeat that to the end of the row. Then don't forget the chain, pull up a loop there, and then pull that loop through the other. At this point, the majority of the blanket is done, but we don't want to fasten off here because we have to do the border next. Again, we can avoid weaving in some additional ends by moving right into the border from where we are right now. First, though, let's go ahead and address the ends from your stripe pattern and go ahead and weave in your contrast color ends. Picking back up with your project, replace the Tunisian hook with your 6mm crochet hook. You'll chain 1, and in the same space, we're going to work a corner pattern, which is 2 single crochets, chain 2, and 2 more single crochets. And make 1 single crochet in the side of every row. So find the V along the side of your work, and when you flip it up, you can sort of see the V's along the edge as well. That's where you're going to work your single crochet stitches. You'll just make 1 single crochet for every V that you see. When you get to the bottom edge, work your corner pattern in the first stitch along the short edge. This is now our foundation row edge, or where we started. Again, that corner pattern is 2 single crochets, chain 2, and 2 single crochets. Then you'll continue with 1 single crochet in every stitch. And when you get to the last one, work your corner pattern, repeat in the last stitch. Now rotate your work once again, and if you flip it over to the back, you'll notice that this is the long edge that has the floats from carrying color A. So you can see them sort of along the back. So when you work a single crochet in every row, like we just did for the opposite side, we'll do that exactly the same, but make sure the float is resting on the hook so you're crocheting over it. Now, just as you've seen, you'll finish this side, you'll work your corner the same, and then 1 single crochet in every stitch along the top edge until you get to the first stitch of this round. When you do, you'll join with the slip stitch to that first single crochet. Now the border for this blanket is really simple. We wanted it to be sort of sturdy and a little bit rigid because it's going to help with the curling, which by the way is completely normal. If you're seeing the bottom and the top edge of your blanket curl like crazy, that's just something that Tunisian crochet does, and this border is really going to help settle that out. So here's the repeat for the border. You'll chain 1, which doesn't count as a stitch by the way, and just go ahead and make a single crochet in the same stitch as the chain. Now here's the repeat for the round. Make 1 single crochet in every stitch until you reach the next chain 2 space. And then in the chain 2 space, you'll work your corner pattern, which remember is 2 single crochets, chain 2, 2 single crochets. And repeat. 1 single crochet in each stitch to the next chain 2 space, corner pattern, and so on. And of course, when you get to the end of the round, don't forget to join with the slip stitch to your first single crochet. Now, once again, the total number of rounds in the border is dependent on the size of the blanket you're making. So again, refer to the pattern for that information to guide you along the way. It doesn't matter how many rows you have from here on out. If it's 5 more rows or 6 more rows, the repeat will be the same. So when the border's finished, the last finishing touch here is to add the tassels, which is totally optional, of course. If you choose to add a tassel to each of the 4 corners, you'll make 48 equal cuts of yarn in color A that are about 14 inches long. Go ahead and separate them into groups of 12. And then fold each one of those groups in half. So you should have 4 groups of 12 cuts of yarn. Now poke your hook through any of the chain 2 spaces from back to front. Then place the folded cluster of yarn on the hook and feed it through. So pull up on this loop just enough so you can get 2 fingers through, so you can grab the ends and pull them through. Then pull it tight and repeat for the other 3 corners. That's all for now, friend. Thank you so much for watching, subscribing to the channel, for liking and commenting on my tutorials here. I really appreciate that. Those simple actions are a huge deal because it truly does help me continue to share the hobby we both love. I couldn't do what I'm doing without your support, so thank you so much for that. Happy hooking, and I'll see you in the next one.